Hey guys, welcome back to the Kampai Sugai podcast. My name is Gavin, and today we got some special guests here. We have the CEO, writer, director, and creator of Ocean Black, CEO of Crom Storm Studios, EJ Wedge, and we have actress and marketing consultant for Ocean Black TV, Miss Patty Lee. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Actually, EJ is also. Did you compose the music for Ocean Black as well?
Yeah, I'd say yes. I could answer that question short. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I did that music.
Nice.
I should give a forewarning that he's like really humble. So whenever you say something that's like sounds like, oh man, I'm impressed with that. He'll
The
be
way
like,
he said
oh,
it, I was like, compose. I don't.
Well, I mean,
The
technically,
strong verb.
you would be the composer for this. So, but yeah, I mean, yeah, you own up to it, man. I mean, that's you.
That answer. I love that answer. Great answer. Great question.
So, as you guys know, we're here. We're gonna be talking about Ocean Black, which is the series, the animated series that's gonna be coming out. But this actually started off as a book before, right? For yourself, EJ, you started rating Ocean Black, and
Yeah. So that was a project from years and years ago, and the very long story short, because again, if you let me talk, I'll just keep going.
yeah,
The short version, right, is just um after being at home for a while, having a little more television consumption for me than was normal during the pandemic. I think a lot of people had that. And I had the experience of watching Avatar as an adult. I was like, I have content that I could turn into an animated show. What's holding me back from that? Not a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are, right? We did the thing. But that experience in the middle of 2020 was kind of more directly, I would say, than just the act of me writing those novels, which is now 7-8 years ago. Jeez, God, that went fast.
like time to us.
Yeah. So what I never imagined it would turn into what it's turned into 7 or 8 years ago. I guess my specific answer to your question is that just a couple of years ago, a very recent change led to me saying I should try my hand at this. And I met Patty, I met the Dita Charisma and the team working on the animation side, and it's been really incredible, right? Like finding all these different parts and making them work together. It's not a skill I would have identified myself as having previously, but I will try to give myself some credit there, is kind of finding those people and bringing them together. Folks are doing something really amazing, right? And I'm only one part of that. I get to do the music. I feel privileged, which is why I'm like, compose. Hold on now. Right. But genuinely it comes from a place of, I am helping in this project, right? I'm just one part of the story.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how all of you have connected, because EJ, you're from Massachusetts. Patty is from Maui. I'm on Oahu. I mean, we're pretty much on three different planes, I'd say, of land. So, and then of course, is it Didi?
Dita.
Dita.
Yeah, Dita's
Charisma.
in Jakarta, Indonesia.
Indonesia.
He's in Java there, and he's probably going to work right now. Otherwise, we could probably have grabbed him. But yeah, I think is it right now? Yeah, he's probably on his way to work.
I mean, it's amazing. How did you all connect on
I got a recommendation. Patty should tell her whole story, but I got a very nice recommendation from somebody local to me, and I met Dita through a friend of a friend when he was advertising some of the contract work for Ocean Black.
Mhm.
And I was so impressed with his work that we kept him around, and he's himself had so many connections within his circle in Indonesia that he was able to put a team together very quickly. He's not here to brag about himself, but he's just incredible, right? And his ability to get people together to be passionate about this project. Pararupa is another person who's leading on backgrounds and is another huge element of that illustrative team that's just doing incredible work.
Mm-hmm.
They asked me, I remember it, what kind of background style we were looking for. And one of the examples they said was, or do you want something like Studio Ghibli, right? And like, well, obviously we want what's good, you guys, right? Like, and that team has delivered, I think. So they've been fantastic. And I should let Patty say a couple comments about how we met, because like I said, she got a glowing recommendation from her former mentor. So Patty.
Yeah, so earlier you mentioned that I'm from Maui. I'm actually from Massachusetts, but I live on Maui. So I'm not a local girl. I just look like one.
You do. You very much do, actually.
Yeah, I get that a lot. And I'm a Silva on top of that. So, but anyway, I grew up in Massachusetts, and I went to this performing arts school called the Birtwood School of Performing Arts. Shout out, I think they're on their, like, I don't know, 25th anniversary. I don't know. They're on a big anniversary right now.
Oh, okay.
But Lorna Burnell, who was the owner of that school and also taught many of the classes that I took there, and took me under her wing. I interned with her. I taught at that school eventually when I was in my college years. And yeah, this posting just came across her feed, and I was like, huh, that sounds interesting. And it was really funny, like all of the little qualifications.
Mm-hmm.
I hit them like right on the nail. I'm like, that's me, that's me, that's me. And then it was like in the New England, or I think it was southeastern Massachusetts and Rhode Island area. And I was like, that's not me. But I have access to sound, equipment. I was working at a radio station at the time. So I was like, hey, if I can get recordings, then can I do this? And once I met with EJ, he was like, oh, this is kind of weird. You look like the character.
Yeah, so, that was completely accidentally timed. The way that all came together was actually pretty bizarre and also providential.
Yeah, serendipitous for sure.
That's amazing. I mean, it's amazing that we all connect on a different scale right now. So, and that you guys were able to create a project connecting on, in far distances as well. I mean, Dita's in Indonesia. That's amazing. You know what I mean? So to be able to put together this project, that's pretty awesome in my eyes. So
I applaud you guys for that.
Thankful to Discord, because honestly, I don't know how we'd communicate otherwise.
Yeah, for Discord to be our life raft really tells you where we're at as a project team on some level. But on another, and it's a credit to Patty and Dita that, because communication is tough with me, and we all have day jobs and other ways of making income. We have to be able to operate a little independently, but still with the sense of what is the project, what are the goals, what does it mean, like why do we care, and everyone really stays in sync on that. Like it's admirable. I feel very lucky.
It's hard not to, though, because the project, it's just like a really beautiful story. It's really, I don't know, it's unlike anything else that I'm working on. So it's and I think the same is true for Dita, and that's why we're both so passionate about it.
All right, so yeah, before we get into the series, I actually want to talk about ComicCon. You guys were featured on a panel at ComicCon, so
tell me about that experience.
Patty knows everything. I know nothing. I'm a peasant.
Yeah, that's my job. Honestly, we have some really good friends who had a panel at ComicCon who were like, we had actually been on their podcast, which is the Rabbit Hole podcast. And that's Kavika Hook and Sarah Rodriguez, and just super awesome people. And they were like, you were one of the first people on our podcast. And so if we can pay you back somehow and get you some attention at Comic-Con, we'll feature you. So actually EJ put together a pretty incredible little video that showcased some of the work that went into what we've done and where it's gotten up to this point and kind of where we still need to go. And we showed at Comic-Con, people were pretty receptive. So yeah, we're excited about that too.
And then EJ, what was your reaction to hearing that your series is going to be showcased at Comic-Con. I mean, that must
Must have blown your
I still
mind.
don't believe it. You keep saying words like showcase and featured, and again, your verb choice is just flying 10,000 feet above me, my dude. I love
Well,
it.
shown.
Yeah, sure. Again, right? I was blown away. You know, if it didn't get through to him, hopefully it gets through to him now. Thank you to Kavika for driving that, and to others who, maybe didn't. I'm not aware of, but Kavika certainly has been generous at every stage, and he's given some good industry insight too that I appreciate as a unabashed amateur.
And a big thank you to Saxon Sugai for getting our
And Saxon, yes, too.
our
Oh my God,
footage
right, 'cause he was
of
there as well.
that, because he actually went to Comic-Con and sat in on the panel and watched it and got us some video footage. But he's also part of our project.
Yep.
All right, on. So yeah, let's get into Ocean Black and what the story is about. So I read up a little bit on it, which we'll cover. But EJ, would you want to explain some of the story to us? What's going on? Characters like Tameo
as well.
Tameo.
Tameo. Okay.
Yep. Sure. I'll again, because I'll fly through what I've coined as the infinite kaleidoscope of context, if you let me. So trying to keep it small, right? Like
Don't worry
thing
about
at a time. In the first season, we want to start with, right, because the big discussion was, and I'm encountering this on the writing side too, right? The original novels I wrote, I'm trying to condense them and republish them right now, because I think I have a lot of good stuff, but like anything, it should be honed a little bit. This show represents part of that effort to hone that universe of characters, space opera and all this stuff down to something that's digestible, which is, let's start with one character in one specific place, right? The place is Central Asia, 200 years after some post-apocalyptic event. We can get into details. It's nuclear war, it's plague, it's whatever, but it's almost irrelevant to me anyway for that first season. Something awful happened 100 years ago, and we're in this context now, in this post-apocalyptic context, where in Central Asia, which to me is just fascinating as a place, it's so rarely discussed in popular media. Even where you do see it in like one of the most influential movies for me of my whole life was Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Even when you see it in context like that, where you've got Han Chinese culture presented alongside the Western rider on horseback. I mean, she meets him in the desert. This is representative of those what are now the Uyghurs in China, right? And other Central Asian societies that very rarely, I think, are central in the story. They're side characters. They're not part of the main, but because they're nomadic, they're by their nature, they exist on the periphery. Well, let's make them center stage. And after a post-apocalyptic event, I think that's where they belong. So Tameo is a nomadic character in a nomadic context, kind of going around doing her thing, and all the problems that go with that, and living in a semi-nomadic society where you've got bad guys over here and bad things over there, and your family is nice, but they're not really. And, she has those tensions within. I'm trying not to tell you the whole story of the first season. I want people to watch it. I just want to tell you the plot. So I'm being vague. So, I mean, that's her character's context. The geographic area, again, interests me incredibly, the culture as well. And again, obviously her experiences as a character, being a young woman and trying to survive and having all these incredible talents that she does, and yet she struggles, right? Which to me is, you could put any character in any context. And I think that's something that engages audiences with an interesting character who has a lot of talented and, ability, but yet they encounter some significant conflicts that challenge them and change them. And certainly by the end of the first season, Tameo is totally changed, setting up the big second season where, back to the beginning of what I said, we start to widen the world a little bit for the person. We say, okay, well, we've had you on Earth for this first season, but what if we told you there are other planets? And we're going to go to them, and we're going to see Tameo fight on them and kill people and be a badass and stomp all over people. And by the third season, see a really fantastic character arc for this woman across all different places and times. I think I think it's something that people rarely, if ever, see in television. And I'm obviously I'm getting all wound up because I'm excited to try to make it happen.
Yeah, it's a very interesting story. There's I was reading up on a little bit about there's I guess three major oceans in the universe. So there's made ocean blue, ocean black, ocean white. Could you explain the significance of these in your series?
Sure. And anytime you hear me talking about this and I sound a little like, full of myself, I'm not trying to go full Scientologist on anybody here. I don't claim to have any real significant original ideas. I'm an imitator, as most artists are. So shamelessly sort of rehashing Wu Ching, right? A very ordinary, I should say ordinary, a very well-known Chinese philosophy of the five elements, right? Which correlate to 5 seasons and five and the 5 elements, right? It's a distillation of that, right? Whereas in, oh my God, am I going to do this live right now? Spring, which is wood, turns to summer, which is fire, which turns to autumn, which is, I don't remember. Right.
That's
and
okay.
It goes
That's
into
Right, we got
I have a graphic for it, guys. Okay. And so it goes around in a cycle, right? Ocean black, same exact concept, slightly truncated, right? Where ocean blue is everyone is not quite alive at one point in their life.
Interesting.
Very contentious subject right now. Who governs where that line is drawn, and what is the appropriate person who gets to make the decision about things that happen on what side of that line? Very, very, very significant philosophical question still being debated. But everyone agrees there's a stage, right? Followed by your mortal life, which has an absolute beginning of an end. Everyone's does, right? The planet does eventually. But the planet's going to be just fine, folks. Don't worry about that. And then you have this post-mortal phase, and who knows really what that is. You don't get to know. That's the point. But again, nothing, it sounds all meta, right? But a distillation of Wu Ching, right? With a little bit of Christianity sprinkled in, because obviously that's my context, is growing up Catholic, although I certainly have my own issues with the church these days. But again, right, like that's my context for that 3 oceans concept, is the influence of reading about Eastern philosophy and Wu Ching and Confucianism to a lesser degree, but Confucianism is very academic,
right?
And
yeah,
Christian
it's
thought.
about
That circular motion of life to death, and then what happens in between as well. So that's a very interesting concept, actually. And then I want to talk about so this cataclysmic event. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but is it called the Great Demise in some way?
Yeah.
And then this takes place in Central Asia, and then there's during this this Great Demise, some of the people that I guess are called exiles, they escape Earth, they go to another planet, and then the ones that are left behind are governed by this guy named Ieyasu Sengoku. Okay.
Sengoku Ieyasu. Ripping off Tokugawa Ieyasu. They're the first emperor of Edo era Japan in the 17th century.
Yeah, I was just telling my wife, I was like, "Oh, I know Ieyasu Tokugawa." You know, I mean, if you played what is that, Samurai Warriors games, then that's how I know him. But yeah, could you explain the difference between the Tengoku clan as well as the exiles
in the story?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So again, Central Asia is a practical location as well, kind of in the storytelling, because if you presume that cities suddenly become uninhabitable and indeed dangerous, it turns the wilderness into a place of refuge, right? Another key aspect of Central Asia is traditionally, and not traditionally, I'll tell this story without telling a story about the story. Yeah. The Greeks referred to this big river in Central Asia, the Oxus River, as the River of Eden, right? When some people originally saw it from the Western world, they were like, oh, well, this is Eden. This is what everyone's talking about. And that's how they talked about that particular river. In modern times, it's called the Amu Darya. It is a central geographic feature in season 1. The clipscules that are available right now all center around Temeo going to that river and fighting next to that river, right? And that's a real place that really exists, in Central Asia. And so the difference, I'm sorry, to your question, between, Tengoku, right, that group of people who are living on Earth, and that river represents kind of a border for them. But they're all on one planet, whereas the exiles have left and they've formed these great kingdoms, and they're all just high on life, telling themselves that, wow, we ruined Earth, we should never go back there again. Only to find 100 years later that they overestimated even their destruction of Earth, right? It's sort of this theme running through the entire series of the not just, humanity's hubris in general, but specifically the hubris of the very wealthy, who are like, oh, we destroyed the world, we were so evil and awful, right? Yeah, you didn't really, though, right? If you just would go away for 20 years, it would be fine. I think that's one of the great ironies in general of right, and that's, you've said it correctly, right? That's one of the great ironies of our time, is that climate change is totally manageable. Human beings have the power. I could go on a whole theological epistemological debate with you about why I think it's God-given or your divine power or whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. I think people understand it's doable. Most people don't agree that it's easily doable. But I take that concept anyway in the story and exaggerate it a little to say, well, if they blew everything up and left, they would tell themselves that they've ruined Earth for all time, and it's the land is poisoned and you can never go back there, and it's totally fine. There's people living there, they're fine, right? In the inverse, another subplot within the lore that kind of gets commented on regularly that relates to this point is the exiles hesitate going to new worlds at first, even when they have the technology, for the same reason. They're worried that when they leave, well, everything will be a disaster. Can you even have children on another planet? Won't they come out like zombies, or they'll have 3 heads, or they'll just be literally, the act will cause on another planet, you'll just be ruined. You'll be ruined. You won't be human anymore. And of course, that's not true, right? And everyone quickly forgets that is even a fear by the time they get to those planets. So I try to comment on things like that, because sometimes we take for granted that people, especially religions, would be totally okay with people just going to another planet and starting to have a new civilization. And in fact, just the very idea, I think, would make some religious authorities panic and lose their lunch. That's being generous.
Patty, I want to talk to you about the story so far. So how have the certain plots and everything, how is it connected to yourself as well?
Yeah, well, I feel like I grew up in a household with many, I guess the best way to put it is many parents. My mom and my dad biologically. And then my dad went away and I went to go live with my aunt and uncle. And so the point of what I'm saying is I always had a lot of people with a lot of opinions tell me a ton of different things. And they all believed that they were telling me facts and the truth about exactly how I should live my life and what is right and what is wrong and what is the world. And that just led me to believe that this is the context that most people see the world through, right? Is that I know what my parents taught me and what their parents taught them and so on and so forth. And so I know what's right and I know what's wrong and I know the truth. And what's something that's interesting about this story is here's a woman who, same idea, where she, not necessarily because she has so many parents, I don't know how much I'm allowed to say. Something.
No. I think it's fair to say that Temeo has more than like one parental figure that passes through. That's actually an interesting comment for you to make, that for me to comment on. Yeah, Temeo does not have a consistent parental figure, and other people kind of come in and help steer her and her confidence.
Yeah. And here she is, like this really smart, really strong woman. And so many people and so many outside influences are trying to tell her exactly what she should be doing, and how she should be living her life and where that's going to lead. And she has to actually learn to take a moment and take a step back and analyze whether or not the influences that she's getting are truthful, if they have the right motivations, if their motivations are the same as what her motivations are, and how she's going to act from there. So that element of the story really spoke to me once I heard more about my character and delving into it. And then always just a strong central female character. It's rare, it's exciting, it's just something to, you know, latch onto for sure. And when I heard and read, and the more background I got about the story, the more I was blown away. I mean, EJ, what he's sharing with you right now is just such a small fraction of how much is actually in this universe and how much of the story there is. So it's just, it could go on and on and on and on. And that alone is something that is exciting to me.
Cool. I want to talk about the other characters as well. Who are Nara and then or Nara, and then who are Jin Hanbei, and how do they relate to Tameo in the story?
Yeah, I'll take that, and so obviously we have more people to introduce for this first season. The focus has been on these two characters because, well, long story short, again, of the scenes that we chose to animate first to kind of present the idea. So Nara and Jin Hanbei are both kind of supporting characters relative to Tameo. Jin Hanbei actually throughout all 3 seasons is present, although he's present for all 3 seasons, and he's just a really important kind of mentor figure for Tameo, which obviously results in regular tension because she's not always willing to listen or take direction. Nara, if Jin Hanbei is kind of like the mean, salty teacher, Nara is a bit of a shoulder to cry on. He's much calmer, but he's still also a very, very skilled warrior and very we'll say committed to Jin Hanbei and making sure that people respect him and do what he says. Because Hanbei himself, and this is probably the real piece of meat you're looking for, Jin Hanbei himself and his backstory, right? His whole lore is that he is the kind of the only well-respected son of the big boss, right? Tengoku Ieyasu. But Hanbei's problem is that he made a big screw up and kind of lost his stature, and he's been sent to guard the border where, not much is happening while his older brothers go and do big things. They all end up getting themselves killed in India, and it's a huge disaster. I'm telling you part of the story, and I shouldn't be, but again, right, Hanbei's whole thing is he's lost his stature, and he's trying to gain it back. And as he's doing so, Tameo comes into the picture and is, and he's basically, all right, well, I'm on the warpath to gain my honor back. You want to learn how to do real war, not just standing in a, dueling ring and beat the crap out of every single person who stands in front of you, right? We're gonna do something that's real, and it requires her to do things she's not used to. And Hanbei is the one, in terms of what actual role he plays, Hanbei is the one who's constantly, probably the most, saying no to Tameo.
Yeah, and what's interesting, I think, about his character too is that he takes a lot of stances that are sort of pragmatic. Whereas Tameo holds a lot of rigid ideas about how things should work, just based on her former knowledge of how the world that she lives in works. And he's kind of sometimes saying, look, this time we're going to do it this way, and this time we're going to do it that way, and that's part of what you need to learn. I think that's kind of cool, his character. And correct me if I'm wrong, EJ. That's just how I interpret it.
You're right.
And of course, they'll grow along the way. There's already a lot to this universe already. So EJ, where'd you get the inspiration for this story? Because I look at the art direction and it looks very much like Avatar: The Last Airbender, but then you also have Jin, Nara, and then Tameo, which is like a big three, which is kind of like Star Wars, where you have Luke, Han, and Leia. Is Was Star Wars also an inspiration, or
Am I just reading too much into it?
No, no, Star Wars is absolutely an inspiration. How could it not be? I just so that I answer the right question. Should I answer that as like where did I start with the books, or just like with the show itself?
you can start with the books and then how you translated it to the show? Yeah.
First couple of stories I ever wrote when I was like 12 or 13. Do you literally have to show your cat butt? Just right there. Thank you. Hello.
Cat
Hello. I
butt.
love you. I know. They're just she can hear you. They speak English.
Oh, good.
Anyone who tells you they don't understand you, they do.
My dogs do, so I believe it.
So as far as writing, very, very young, yeah, I was inspired by the games I was playing and by the movies I was watching. And the big ones were Star Wars at the time. Obviously, my mother has introduced me to most of my cultural influences. Star Wars was one of them. And some of the games I was playing at the time, oh God, Final Fantasy VII and StarCraft. All when I'm 12, 13, 14. Playing this like weird thing that was like the most popular thing in the world in Korea, the StarCraft, and Final Fantasy VII. For those who know, it just is one of the just great pieces of art from the gaming world, in my opinion. So it was games that were influencing me. Oh, and I should, how could I not mention on the gaming side, Chrono Trigger, another amazing,
Love that game.
Another amazing first gen. Like the storytelling in that game, you didn't see anywhere else. At the time, you didn't see a game where you could change the literal timeline and see that played out and the consequences of that played out, right? Like inside of an RPG, it was wild. So I had that going on, and then again, Star Wars is unbelievable. I don't think I need to. Sometimes I wonder if I do need to explain the importance of the original trilogy to people, because I was in a chat the other day in Discord with some friends of mine I play games with. And a bunch of them said like, oh yeah, I'm introducing so-and-so to Star Wars. Yeah, we haven't watched any of the original ones yet. And I'm like, but guys, right? Again, right? I don't know how old you are, but I know I'm old. And, because of that, you're just going to, I'm sorry. And you're just going to keep getting people who haven't exposed to it. So I guess I would, if for those who hadn't seen it, right, I think the charm of the original trilogy that most influenced me was the way that the main characters, right, Han, Leia, and Luke, just they're put into all these crazy contexts in science fiction, and all those contexts were so cool. And it's like, yeah, spaceships and Death Star, and like that's cool, like. But again, it's a opera about main characters set entirely to music, 100% of it. There are notes playing when people are speaking, when people are not speaking, when the ships are blowing up. I could tell you exactly what is on the screen in the original trilogy, right? And I portray my age here. But I could tell you what is on the screen shot by shot just by listening to the John Williams soundtrack for that movie, right? Because again, it's through the whole way. So that again, when I'd say Star Wars is my inspiration, it's less so the science fiction context and the characters themselves, who, while all fascinating, George Lucas himself said he stole from Dune. So it wasn't necessarily unique on its own. But to his credit as a filmmaker, it was the way that was assembled, using some of the traditional, what was traditional at the time in the 60s and 70s, having a full score, right? Again, every second has an orchestra backing it up. And all the other pieces that went into that, but especially the way the main characters had so much charisma with one another. To have that with music, real charisma and emotion between the characters set to music, you could put them in any context, and the little would instantly place you in the emotion that character's experiencing. So everything that went into watching that has certainly influenced me in the making videos stage, less so the writing, although I always liked it, but taking that writing and trying to turn it into visuals, yes, Star Wars hugely influential. How could it not be? And then making an animated show, choosing to make it an animated show, yes, watching Avatar and seeing Avatar for the first time, I mean, I cried.
My wife too.
You know?
At me right now.
Yeah, like when Iroh takes back Zuko, I can't even think about it too much, or I'll start tearing up on video, right? Like,
But my wife agrees.
It's such a good show. Another favorite of mine that I've named before, Samurai Champloo. I had seen it a couple of times before I watched it with my wife, but I know at the end of that she was bawling because it's like she said, you know, you don't want the journey to end. That one comment from that show, I have many things influenced me from that show, but just that one comment alone obviously has stuck with me for 15 years now.
How about for you, Patty? How's the artistic part, like for inspiration? What do you think, like for Ocean Black? What would you compare it to in terms of maybe shows or animated series that have been out?
You know, to be quite honest with you, I'm not a huge animated show watcher, which has kind of been an interesting challenge for me on the marketing side of this, because I don't have a lot of experience with it. But what I do recognize from Ocean Black is a lot of the sort of epic tales that I've watched and been involved in. And also, my husband is a huge reader of those kinds of tales. So every time I watch anything with him, when we watched, I want to say like Lord of the Rings the first time, from beginning to end, you know, I don't know how many hours that actually is, but for us, it took like, I don't know, maybe like 60, because every time I watch anything with him, he pauses every 5 minutes to tell me the backstory of why this is relevant and why I should care about it. So it's really funny because, you know, I'm not the nerd in our family, but I appreciate it. I really, really appreciate it, because otherwise I would have so much less context and so much less understanding of what is actually going on in these stories. For me, they're so in depth, and there's so many little teeny tiny details that you could miss if you just didn't know. And I would. Most times when I watch this stuff, he'll tell me something and I'll be like, are we watching the same thing? But it's helpful that he usually has the context of having read the thing in advance. But yeah, someone had recently commented something about Samurai Jack. And so I did a little bit of research into that show and was like, yeah, I see it. Like story-wise, it's really similar. Animation-wise, it's totally different. And personally, I prefer our animation, but yeah, I like that story as well. And I think it's not so different from our own.
I think like my favorite scene from Lord of the Rings was spoilers for people that are listening, but
we haven't watched
shame on you if you haven't seen it. So, Star Wars I can understand is 1977, but Lord of the Rings is the year 2000.
Yeah.
it's newer. But I will say at the end of the Return of the King, when everybody bows to the hobbits, I thought
that was such a good scene.
Similarly, that same kind of scene that happens in Mulan. I don't know if you've ever seen that. That one moment where she like saves the whatever, I don't know what you call him.
We'll
oh my
say
God.
the kingdom. She saves the kingdom.
Yeah, whatever. She saves the kingdom. And then, everyone bows down to her instead of her feeling shame for not being this woman, that she was supposed to be, and this demure, marryable woman, but actually for saving the whole freaking kingdom. I thought that was really a beautiful moment. So actually that's really relevant to this story as well, I'd say.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, people might be bowing to Tamayo at the very end. Who knows? We'll see. Spoilers.
You don't have to guess.
You don't have to guess, you say.
So I want to talk about the animation process because for myself, I don't know much about animation and the intricacies of getting into it, but I saw a little bit of what EJ was doing before he started off with like watercoloring, which I thought was really interesting. But how is that process? So you start off with watercoloring, and then what do you do after that?
We didn't end up going the watercolor background style. That was a different style that we tried, and ultimately it just wasn't something we could execute consistently. So we did a little bit back to the drawing board. But the process, regardless of what backgrounds we were using, is very similar. All the backgrounds are digitally painted now by Harupa's team. And so what that process looks like from beginning to end, stop me when I start talking too much. I will try to do the short version of this.
I'm just watching your cat too.
Yeah, I know. Again, right? I told you. She can hear us talking about her. Totally understands.
She's like, so I know how entertaining I am.
It'd be real. Actually, I don't have to talk about the Ocean Black. I'm going to tell a cat story real quick. One time, this beautiful cat behind me, who is so wonderful and just so sweet, right? I was sitting on the bed. My other cat comes in the bed every morning at exactly 7:30 after I go to the bathroom after I wake up.
Wow.
Jumps in the bed, like for pets. So he's lying next to me. This one will crawl up to the bed, peek up over the bed to see that he's laying with me, and will punch him as hard as she can.
Oh my gosh.
Because she hates him and beats him up every time he gets on the bed. So just so you know, this cat is a bully. Anyway.
That's why she's in the shot.
Speaking of,
she's trying to bully us right now.
Exactly. She's bullied her way on camera right now without my permission. She didn't ask. I didn't hear a meow.
She's an attention whore. We know.
So the animation process. So it starts with obviously it starts off with bullying myself into sitting down and actually writing out a script. Honestly, that's the most painful part. Anytime, and this is probably one of the reasons why I've been able to take my hands off the wheel sometimes and just be like, okay, good luck, Tita. I'll talk to you next week. I feel so badly. Genuinely, right? Because I know that sometimes he has questions and we're out of sync. And I have a day job, and he has to make a creative decision on his own. So he's doing a great job, obviously. But it starts with that script, right? So I got to go through and I do the whole script, and then I walk through it with him again, and we identify every single shot. Like if I showed you the script right now, it would look like, I think Patty's seen the production script. It is separate. Every single shot is separated. Like there are line breaks everywhere.
Wow. Okay.
That describes which shot each piece of dialogue belongs on, and then which line of description belongs with which shot. Right. And mind you, sometimes to my point about Dita, sometimes I'm giving Dita one sentence. The river was wide and the hill was right. Like it's just like he's got one sentence to go with. So that's the script, right? That's what you start with.
Yeah.
The next step is layouts, right? And again, I'm shortening this for the sake of brevity and also somewhat entertainment. The next step is layouts, right? So now we have to roughly plot. Theoretically, we know how many shots we want, and I've skipped over a lot in terms of the script writing. But theoretically, we know how many shots we want, and now we're going to lay out what each shot looks like roughly what are the design elements. It doesn't have to be beautiful, but it's going to be a rough sketch. this past section we did was the first time we've actually taken a whole 5-minute chunk at the time. That's why this thing we're going to do at the end of the year is going to be our biggest video ever. It's going to represent the culmination of all of our self-funded work. The layout work, that's been a lot easier because we're doing a bigger chunk. So I can't remember how many files we did, but we couldn't have done more than 30 or 40 drawings for 5 minutes. That's still a lot of shots. It's going to be more than 50 shots. So you do the layouts and you plan what you're going to do. Now, at that point, hopefully for the most part, Dita doesn't need me too much. We've agreed on the length of the shots, more or less. That was in the script. I actually numbered for each shot roughly how many seconds I believed. Right? We've got the shots. We know roughly what's happening in each shot. Now the animation team is going to go and actually try to sketch each shot, the length of each one, and animate each one. And all along, they're going to be talking to me about, well, we didn't know what to do with this. What about this? Or we've tried this thing. Or most of the time, right, it's just because I haven't been specific enough and they have to figure out what do words mean? What does it mean when Temeo attacks and kills 3 people, right? What are words? So that's a lot of work for them, right? And that's the bulk of the work, and that requires a team. While they're doing that, again, we have a layout. There's a second layer that needs to be built. So if you imagine there's one team right now building the animation layer that sits on a white background, right? Pretend I looked in your Instagram right now and I watched a video of just a white background with, you know, a character snapping their fingers, right? That's the layer they're working on. The background layer is a totally different layer being worked on by the team in parallel based on, again, on that layout. They'll come back and they'll probably do another version of the layout stage that'll be much more specific. It'll basically be a sketch of the background, right? Like, this is what it looks like. And remember, some shots, you probably actually don't know this, sorry. Remember, some shots don't have animation, right? It's just a shot of a background. It's a painting. You're just, you're painting and you're just doing this, right? You're just moving the camera on a painting to give the sense of motion or a bird's eye view, right? So both those layers are worked on in parallel by the team, some faster than others, all prioritized by Dita based on what the project needs and what it makes sense to go first and last. I've reduced in 2 minutes an incredible amount of work that he does. And then it's because at the end of that, right? So if you imagine this layout, then this animating, and then a wild background painting is also happening, right?
Yeah.
And then if those two parallel things come together and down the railroad, and then we bring them together in the compositing phase, right? Where we lay that top layer onto the background layer. And then before they turn it over to me, hopefully they do a mastering phase too, where they go back through, make sure the colors match, right? Which, again, by using one connected team like this, all using the same set of rules, you don't wind up with issues in that later phase where colors don't match and lines aren't the same width and all this crazy silly stuff that is, remember what I said at the very beginning when we started, everything is stupid. Right? If you don't do the dumbest possible thing and make sure even the width of the lines are the same, you're going to wind up with animation that looks and feels different, and the uncanny valley effect will come in. Your users will immediately be able to tell, because the difference is so slight, it's actually magnified. It's awful. So we have to be good when they composite it, finalize it, create that shading, those lighting effects, all those things that give it depth and make it real and make it look good.
I can actually picture in my mind one of the storyboards that I've seen where there was clearly one image that was one of those, oh, we'll fill this in for right now and wait and see what he actually wants. Because it's like my face, you know, my character's face, just like.
Yeah. So you know what the origin story for that very smiley Temeo face is just in general another place of information that to me is second nature, right? Describe Temeo. What is she like? What kind of facial expressions does he have? What is her personality? What does she say when she talks? I actually have a tab in front of me if I could open my book here real quick. When we're making these characters, right, we're defining traits about them and what kind of characteristics they have. Well, Dieter needs that information when he's animating, right? So he can make their facial expressions. So what I showed him is I'll show it really quickly, right? What I showed him is like, I make a little table of the characters and what kind of physical traits do they have? Like, if we're just going to describe them very quickly, what kind of emotional traits do they have? Meaning, what kind of facial expressions do they exhibit? What kind of, are their shoulders hunched forward all the time? Are they tense? Are they bad? Right? Like, and then in terms of the speech, right? What kind of things do they say? Right? And I just talked to you through the whole animation side. I haven't talked to you at all about the audio, right? Patty is like did a ton of work there. That I didn't have to do in very few takes with professional recording equipment, and had the audio be clean and good and be usable and not require anyone to do any work, right? It's a game of little things, right? To make sure that the thing that you're producing not only is high quality because you started with a high quality plan, but also, forgive the expression, it doesn't have any scratches on it from along the way, right? Because you carried it through and you made sure that each person who touched it did the thing that they were exposed to without, forgiving the phrase, screwing out, right? Because again, all it takes is something small, right? In television in general, one thing I've learned to be attuned to more and more as I read the entertainment news and you look at what happens to these different projects and which ones rise and fall. In project management, if even one of these little dominoes falls off, the whole thing is in danger. And a specific actor gets in trouble, or a specific, part of the plan which can't be executed. And now everything downstream is kaput. So it's a very risky business, and keeping things on track and making sure that people are doing the right things. You need a lot of people, and you need people you can trust. And once again, we're very lucky.
Yeah, making sure things stay parallel to where when it does cross, everything kind of comes together. And it could be one scene, it could be the whole series, but
specifically just for one
process.
scene. All right,
it's a challenging process. Arcane, we were just talking about Arcane, weren't we, Patty? Before this call, Arcane, incredible show, show, just unbelievable, right? Looks unbelievable, storytelling's unbelievable. Man, they spent almost $100 million on that show. It took them 6 years to develop. I can't imagine how much, like how many actual man hours that is.
Yeah, and you were talking about the size of their team as well, like just because
you have to,
already
for $100 million, right? You have anything, animate anything you want. But that's the point, right? Is relative to the process. And this is the comment that I didn't make, it was implied, but I'll be explicit. During that process, cost is a factor the entire time. This is self-funded. I am not a wealthy person. I'm not going to talk about my finances on Instagram Live, right? But it's like, we're doing everything we can to make sure that the resources that we have them so we can complete the goal we want, right? And that goal is to get that 5-minute clip out and show the world of, a setting that Temeo can be in, can talk in, and can do some violence in. The process, though, again, to my earlier point, if it's not managed and if people aren't doing their part or they're scratching the proverbial record up, it's an enormous amount of money, because a team that it takes to do this work is challenging. So it's a credit to everybody that's doing it and doing it well, because it is hard, and you see other teams and even large companies completely fail. I mean, to even get out of the starting. So there'll be times, Patty knows this probably too well, that I'm a little despondent, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, I'm worried, right? Because it's just me. I'm not Hollywood. But on the other hand, I'll look at projects, I'll read the news, and I'll think about things, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, there's people who can't even get a main character, right? There's people who can't even get out of the concept stage because they don't know what they really want. They don't have a goal, right? We have an objective, and we know exactly what it is, and we have a straight line to get there. We're not going to tell a story that's necessarily revolutionary, I don't think. Again, I don't claim to be a prophet, and maybe that's too humble of me. but certainly have something valid to tell. Can I tie this speech back? I swear I'll stop talking.
Of course.
With a comment you made earlier about the inspiration. I wanted to be positive. I have to coach myself sometimes that I'm not too negative. But I'll tell you, the negative inspiration for the show was Game of Thrones, right? And how that ended, and how the character of Daenerys Targaryen was treated, right? And wanting to see a television show that actually decides to make a female character the center. I don't think the show could ever really decide whether Daenerys was the main character. The dragons were great until, I guess they weren't. To see a story that puts someone like that in a situation and they win, and I want to see that.
That's a good goal to have, and just kind of shifting topics a little bit. I want to talk to Patty about being a voice actress for this one, because a lot of people know her from the Peekables, the commercials, shows, different modeling gigs, and even being a host on Maui News Now. So with this role, being a voice actress, how different has that been for you compared to your other roles?
Well, so I grew up and I studied theater. So I've been doing acting, that part of it, my whole entire life. And then, I would say maybe in the last 5 years or so, really transitioned to being on camera. That was a big change for me. And then in the last 4 years, I got a job at Maui Now, or with Pacific Media Group is a better way to say it, because I was both operations manager of Hawaii Airport Advertising, as well as working on Maui Now as an on-air host. But also part of that is that I was on the radio. So I mostly on the radio, just did commercials. But that was my first foray, I would say, into voice acting. And it was a lot to learn. It's interesting to communicate without your face. That's one of the things that I would say most people say I have the strongest ability with, is that my face is very expressive. So to have to do that with your voice alone, that's kind of a different set of tools, particularly in situations like this with the animation, where it's so much of it's in your imagination. There's these moments that happen just before, just after, around the corner. You're thinking through this character that started their life so many years ago and experienced so much. So every sentence that she's saying comes with a context. And then on top of that, to know that the animation is going to be based off of that to some degree. That's kind of a lot of pressure. But for me, it's all fun. It's all acting. It's all the same thing, really. It's just a different set of skills that I had to develop.
When you're voice acting, do you stand up or sit down? Because I know some people, they when they get into the mode of it, they have to stand up for.
I stand for it, for sure. I do a lot of vocal warm-ups, which is, coming from my theater background, but also I when I was a kid, had a lot of vocal therapy because I had nodules on my vocal cords.
Oh, okay.
So I've learned a lot of just different tools. So yeah, people will see me like, then doing all these really weird things. But that's just all warming up my face and my muscles and my mouth and all these things, because you don't ever want to get caught in a moment where you're not ready to articulate exactly what you're trying to say.
I kind of want to see Tameo do that. Maybe she's gonna have maybe she'll do her own.
If you send me a recording of this, I'm gonna send that recording to Dita and tell me.
All right. Yes. Is he going to animate me as me or as her?
No. Get y'all Tameo.
That would be interesting. If you did an animation between Tameo and Patty Lee, and then just have them have a conversation with each other.
Ooh, I'm for that, EJ. Get on that.
Yeah.
Put your hard-earned dollars towards that.
Self-funded.
This is what's called in project management changing the requirements. Scope creep. That's another expression.
It'd be fantastic marketing, EJ.
Yeah, okay.
That would be a really interesting concept because
Finishing the show would be fantastic marketing. Personal opinion.
What would be?
Finishing the
finishing
show.
the project.
Yeah.
Yeah, you nailed it on the head right there, EJ.
That would be a pretty cool concept, though. If you had that, like, you just had that interaction, I could just see that. That's really.
That'd be a really
No,
intriguing.
maybe when we're further along, that'll happen.
Uh-huh.
I think a girl can dream. Thanks for the idea, Gavin.
Of course, so you guys can take that. You guys can own it. You know.
Oh.
Yeah, showcase
We'll
it.
give you credit.
No, you don't have to give me any credit. Just say we thought of this ourselves, and then maybe they'll look at this video and they go,
Actually, Gavin thought of it, but that's okay.
This doesn't seem their style.
So I got a few more questions for you guys. What have been some of the hurdles with creating Ocean Black, and what have you both learned from this experience?
Patty, you want to go first? I gotta think
Sure.
of my answer.
Sure. I think the biggest challenges with creating this show for me have just been obviously not being physically in the same place. That's always kind of fun and interesting. And then also just finding and utilizing the right equipment so that everything sounds right. But then, on the marketing side of things, it's that we want to really be seen on a large scale, but we don't have enough content to share at this point to gain that audience. So it's like this constant, like, here's a little tidbit, come pay attention, because with your eyes, hopefully eventually we'll get the network's eyes. And once the networks, give their contribution, then we've got 3 seasons ready to go. Boom. It's just a matter of how do we get from point A to that finish line. I don't want to say point B because I feel like there's a lot of steps in between, but just how do we get to that finish line? How's the fastest way we get there? How do we get the most number of eyeballs on us? That's really what it's come down to be, in my opinion, the biggest challenge for Ocean Black.
And then EJ for yourself.
The biggest challenge is overcoming, to me anyway, the desire to say too much. I want it to represent everything that I care about, and I have to narrow in a little bit for this part of Ocean Black, right? If I look at that as like a whole thing that I did, that I'm, like I said earlier, trying to re-release those novels in a more pointed way. I think the hardest thing for me is figuring out what doesn't belong. I could say a lot more about that, but that's the hardest part. What doesn't belong in a television show, an animated television show, that I have to, again, remind myself, what is the specific objective? The objective is to see Temeo be talented without being a Mary Sue, which I know is a pejorative that people love to throw around these days in a world where
I do not know what that means.
Oh, that's good that you don't, then. Without, tropes about, female main characters, right? I want to see Kameo be good, be talented, while being flawed, and not have it be some fucking cliche thing where it's like, oh, she couldn't overcome her flaws, woohoo, right? And it's just another Greek tragedy. Like, I've sort of seen that before. A little bit too much. Again, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, right? I'm not going to even tell people what the ending is. I can't bear to watch it anymore anyway. I'm 35. I'm like, nope, I shut that shit right off. I start bawling when Lee Mubai dies, and I'll just never, I just can't even get to the end after that. I like to see, this is actually partly I don't give her enough credit either. My wife, who pretty much edits and quality checks and gut checks just about everything I do. A thing we'll often talk about when we watch shows and we're kind of playing a game where we're trying to predict the ending is, oh gee, I really want to see something positive where people are happy at the end. I don't know if this is going to be happy at the end. I know I'm going to see Tameo win, though. That'll make me happy. And I think other people will get there, too. But managing what doesn't belong so that we can get there, that's really, really hard. I can't really talk about it intelligibly. I wish I could more, maybe. It's hard for me to talk intelligibly with an audience because I'd start riffing on, like, all this made-up imaginary nonsense in a universe that I haven't even begun to explain. It just sounds like a crazy person.
I looked up Mary Sue.
Oh, what is it?
Oh, you didn't know either. Would you like to share, Patty?
I've heard
Yes.
of it before.
Yeah, I'll share. So a Mary Sue is a term used to describe a fictional character, usually female, who's seen as too perfect or almost boring for lack of flaws, originally written as an idealized version of an author in a fan fiction, usually written by young authors, as their first shot trying to idealize a female character that is free of flaws.
Yeah, so we were just talking about Star Wars, and that's part of what made me think about it. That was a phrase that was lobbed at Miss Ridley's character. Oh my God, why can't I think of it? Rey, right?
Rey.
Lots of people said that about Rey, which I didn't like the new Star Wars movies that much, but I don't think she did a bad job. It's easy to just use her as an example, though. I got on this subject by saying again, what I want to see out of this main arc for this show, I think, is a little different. And certainly, again, it's in response to, I feel, the other stories. And again, that Game of Thrones I cited as the one that made me the angriest. Is kind of what my motivation is to see that story. And, hopefully I'm not the only one out there telling it. I don't want to be, again, I don't want to be a prophet. I don't want to be the only one out there saying that stories like this should exist. Realistically, it shouldn't be that unique to do what I'm doing. What we're doing.
And just a quick note on the sequels for Star Wars. Actually, I think all those actors are phenomenal people. They're phenomenal actors. I think they were just put in situations that maybe weren't ideal
for their character.
It's being very generous. I agree.
Very generous. I mean, my wife and
but relative to the position they were put in, I agree with you absolutely. That I think lots of people, John Boyega and Daisy Ridley.
Daisy Ridley's phenomenal, but yeah, she was just put in a weird position, I think. But
we can. My wife and I can go on and on about that.
She's not Palpatine. She is Palpatine, right? Like somehow the Emperor. I love.
Now she's Skywalker.
I love the Emperor. Great villain. How did they screw that up? I don't know. I'm an old man. No one wants to hear me say Star Wars is bad.
We'll save that for another podcast.
Yeah, for real. No one wants that. No one wants that. They're all good movies. Everyone should watch all of them.
So I want to talk about the future of Ocean Black, and what does that look like for you guys?
Well, I mean, short term, it's staying focused on this November so that we release the full trailer we're planning on. We want it to be cinematic. We're shooting for 5 or 6 minutes at least, I think. In a scene that will show some of the things and what we're capable of, right? We're going to show our character. We're going to show her doing cool stuff. We're going to have some tension. We're going to have some battle. We're going to have lots of battle, hopefully. And I don't know. That's why I'm not in the market. I'm excited. It's going to be it's getting that done is like the event horizon that I'm having trouble seeing beyond. I think once we get that done, though, very much my hope, like Patty said, is to widen our audience, to show what we're capable of in that clip, what amounts to, I know I'm putting a little too much stock on this maybe, but what amounts to a 5 or 6 minute clip, I think will very genuinely prove this is a team. This team is capable of doing something big, something really cool. And if some people, some right people, take notice, I think this is something that could be produced and could be, because I have business experience and I know what words people use, we can be competitive, right? Because that's what everyone's doing. They're competing for attention. We're doing that right now on Instagram, right? It's on some level, it's a zero-sum game. I don't believe that necessarily, but I know that is within the business world how it's perceived, that it's zero-sum. And so you have to come with something that can be competitive. It's not artistically like what some people have commented to me is like a high art animation style, these JoJo and these ridiculous things. Ridiculous is the wrong word. The artists are enormously talented, right? But the frames per shot and the detail, A, I'm not funded for that. B, again, it's not really the style we're pursuing. Our style is hopefully sitting on some nice middle ground between Japanese and American animation styles with an adult storytelling that, again, is competitive, that people will want to watch, that producers will want to back. We're trying to find that sweet spot while, again, still staying true to the objective, which is to tell a specific story for a specific character. If someone tries to stop me from doing that, I'll just find something else to do. Honestly, I can keep myself busy with creative projects, but I'm certainly not prepared to give up, and I don't think I'll have to give up. I think we have a future where we can get this done. This clip, though, is definitely the biggest thing and sucking up all of my focus. Maybe Patty has a longer view comment than me, but
what I would say is this process is so different than any of the other types of like film, television, anything like that, where typically you start with the actual film, let's say. You film the film, and then based on what you've gotten from your film, you cut it up and you create a trailer and you say, this is what our film is about, right? Because it's animation, it's so different because every single frame, costs money, takes time, what have you. So we're building our episode and everything that we're having animated based on the trailer itself, so that we're first saying, hey, look, this is what we're about. And then once people are like, hey, I'm into what you're about, then we're like, okay, now we can create it for you because we already know what we're doing. We're just waiting for that first step where everyone's going, hey, this is of interest to me. So just getting from there to the other spot is really primarily what's in the future for my mind. The reason I've put so much stock in this particular story is just because I believe in it. It's a labor of love. It's not like so many other things that I do them because I get paid for them. And don't get me wrong, EJ does pay me. I don't want to say he doesn't. That's not the point of what I'm saying. But the point of what I'm saying is that I don't do it because of that. That's just an added bonus. I do it because I really believe in the story, because I believe in the characters, because I do, unlike him, think it is a fresh take on a lot of different subjects. And because So I was recently having a conversation with a bunch of producers, and one of the things that we're saying is that, a lot of times when you get people's stories, people who write stories all the time are really good at writing stories, right? Because they know all the tropes and they know all of the sort of organizational system of how stories are written, and they can bang them out real quick, and then when you meet someone who is sharing their one and only story, their heart is so deeply into it that they don't know how to edit out. And so they say too much. And it's exactly what EJ was saying. And I think that EJ is I guess, self-reflective enough to be able to filter and figure out what needs to be said, what needs to be shared later, because there's certainly a lot more to be said than what Ocean Black is going to say, but there's also more opportunities. There are other stories. There are other shows potentially. There's a lot more opportunity in this one large universe, in this one large story, than just what we have to show. And hopefully this is the thing that launches that.
I just know that, Patty, the biggest affirmation I get from you, I think, is just that we do have an audience. We just have to find it. When I was talking to Tina, my wife, about how it can just suddenly happen, and if you believe in the thing and you persevere, you don't underestimate it, in other words, right? And the example when I was talking to her that I gave her was, I'm in my 30s now, but I can remember being young enough and watching SpongeBob SquarePants, watching that cartoon when it first came out. Did either of you watch that when it first came out?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
So I had this experience. I watched that first season of SpongeBob. I'm just a kid. It was fucking hilarious. It was one of the funniest things we had ever seen. It was me, my brother, who's 2 years younger than me, and my mother, right? And long story short, obviously, my parents were divorced, so on weekends and some of the days, it would just be the three of us, my mother and my brother and I. And so we watched that first season together, and some other cartoons. Rocco was amazing as well. But SpongeBob was like, holy crap, this thing is the funniest goddamn thing. Can't wait for the next season, right? Now, every year, back in the 90s or whatever it was, for fun, my family would take us to New York City around Christmas time, and we'd get on the train and we'd go there. And in New York City, they have this giant, I don't know what's happened to it since then, they have this giant toy store, FAO Schwartz. And I'll never forget going in there and being like, hot damn, we are going to get some SpongeBob toys like you can't believe. This is going to be in money. And just the disappointment of wandering around FAO Schwartz for I don't know how long, and finally finding somebody who's like, where are the SpongeBob toys? And they looked at us like, what are you talking about? SpongeBob who? Right? All year, SpongeBob, watching reruns, right? He's the funniest thing in the world. How could this person not know who SpongeBob is? What is the matter with this person? Right? No toys, none. Well, we have Cat Dog. What? And think of now, 20 years later, okay.
Going anywhere.
The memes, the just everything.
SpongeBob had a movie, and Cat Dog didn't have a movie.
Well, it's not the only thing Cat Dog didn't have.
It's true.
Right? Like, and not to discredit that show, because I think I watched that cartoon when I was a kid too. But again, what was far and away, right, a massively influential show, and just everything about it, right? You can't say enough good things about that show, and it's so tragic that the creator passed away. And I think he said, like, you shouldn't don't make another thing, and they're doing it anyway, and it's horrible. Maybe I'm on social media too much, though. I shouldn't probably say that without confirming that. The point of the story, though, is that what we're trying to go out and do, people are going to discover it, and it doesn't have to be this like massive thing right away. Even one of the greatest cartoons of all time that launched on network television was completely unrecognized and underappreciated everywhere until suddenly it started to gain traction, right? And so we're taking the same approach, right? And things are a little different now than they were in 1999. But I think getting out there and showing people something that we think they want to see, and I absolutely am convinced that people want to see this animation style with an adult story, right? Well, we just got to get it out there.
Well, I think you guys are on the right track, because I mean, just looking at the animation, looking at the story arc, and then the ideas behind it, the plot, the characters, it's very well versed, and I think it can be fleshed out to even a bigger universe. So I applaud you guys for what you guys have accomplished so far, because I think it's just gonna go up from here, and you just got to keep pushing for it and keep getting it out there. Someone's gonna pick it up. Netflix has been picking up everybody.
So who knows? Maybe Netflix will pick it up.
I'll tell you, Netflix actually canned a whole lot of their animation studios, so we're probably not going to get a net call from Netflix.
Okay.
But not everybody
Mhm.
is Netflix, and I'll tell you,
Right.
Netflix is, I think, from whatever I read, probably too much industry publication stuff because it makes me quite depressed. Netflix has seemed to have suffered a bit of a, ate too much. Pick your
They
word or
have.
whatever.
Mhm.
They bit off a little more than they could chew.
Mhm.
And their management doesn't appear to be versed in the industry well enough to know what to do with that.
Mhm.
And so I think that's causing a lot of churn over there, especially in animation.
Mhm.
I've read a couple of season names who's I couldn't regurgitate them to you right now, but who have basically gone running back to the old network TV folks and been like, "Can we do a deal?" Because the streaming people are no longer cutting checks quite so easily.
Mhm.
Well, I
that
think
doesn't, but the demand is there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not discounting what you're saying.
I think Netflix actually also they're part of a big lawsuit recently that they have to pay a whole bunch of people, writers,
Mhm.
For what do you call it? I just got one of these checks the other day in the mail. What do you call it? I don't know. I can't think of what it's called.
Like a
when
royalty?
when they pay you like over the course of time. Yeah, royalties essentially. There's another word, but anyway, yes, they're in a little bit of hot water right now. But all that aside, thank you. We appreciate you just for taking the time to even talk with us. I know you've been talking to a lot of political candidates, so this is totally different direction.
This is refreshing for me.
Oh my God. You're not a crazy QAnon guy, right? You
No,
didn't accidentally put me on a QAnon show, did you, Patty? No, you're not.
No, honestly,
Okay,
QAnon person, but you don't know whose followers are.
I don't care. I don't want any QAnon people.
I've been getting a lot of
those people are lunatics.
I've been getting a lot of different followers lately, but yeah, I mean the show is naturally we get anybody on like local talent and local, with I'll touch upon this I guess a little bit. I don't know if people are gonna maybe they'll tune this out, but like with political candidates, I had someone reach out to me, and they were the political candidate. They reached out and they were like, "Oh yeah, we've been watching you. We want to be on the show." And I was like, "Okay, fine." I was trying to veer away. Oops, I was trying to veer away from it, and then
and lo and behold, I just ended up doing more. But
the show, what I've been doing is more of a celebration for the guests, for artists, for musicians. This is not a political podcast, so I always say that. Yeah, I always tell people this isn't. So if you for political ideas, don't take my ideas seriously, if anything. But for this one, I felt it was very refreshing for me. I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun on this one. It was great talking to you guys about Ocean Black and just learning more about it. And I really invested in the story. It's really good. I actually really like it
so far.
Thank you very much.
Very good job.
It's done.
So just as the last thing, how can people contact you for more information about Ocean Black, and where can people find you online?
Yeah, this should be me, I guess. Uh, so Ocean Black TV pretty much is everything. So we're on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and also we have our website. So oceanblacktv.com. Ocean Black TV on Instagram, Ocean Black TV on TikTok. Yeah, so we're everywhere but Facebook and Twitter, as far as the main places are concerned.
For now, who knows? Maybe later, Twitter and Facebook. You never know.
Yeah, and who knows? We've toyed with also, Kickstarter campaigns and Patreon and things like that, but are kind of still in the conversation stage of that, and whether or not we want to go pitch hard to production companies and those types of things, or if we want to get some funding from the people who believe in us. So one way or another, it's going to happen.
Definitely. I believe in you guys. I believe like what you guys are doing. It's such a great idea, and I think it's like I said before, it's just gonna go out from here. So just keep pushing at it. I think it's a really important story. And animated series in general. Like the Avatar series. I know people have been clamoring for more Avatar, but I mean, this is a brand. It's a fresh story, and it has that same art style, very similar to it. But I think just keep pushing at it. So good job.
Thank you
very much.
Yeah,
Of
we
course.
appreciate that.
And I'll leave your guys's how people can reach out to you, like oceanblacktv.com, in the description below, in this YouTube video. And then for people that are watching or listening, please like, comment, and subscribe if you guys like this video, or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, like, comment, or like and subscribe for more. And yeah, guys, if you guys are normal listeners, we always do a Kampai at the end. So for
Patty and EJ, if you guys have a drink.
Hold on 1 sec.
Okay.
Patty told me to have a drink ready, and I have a drink ready.
Okay. Good. I have my water.
Yeah.
Some people do
Patty
drink
is not
alcohol
ready.
on the set, but I've been having the past few podcasts. I've been having just water, so which is good.
Nobody lights up.
But it's funny. I'll tell this. I'll tell this one quickly. So the ones that I have light up are usually on like weekdays. Like it'll be like a Wednesday, like a really weird day, and a Wednesday night, and they'll be like, "Hey, let's just drink crazy, like shots and everything." And I'm like, I have to work the next day. That's fun. We'll do it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I appreciate when I just have to drink water.
Okay, well, I told him to have it ready. I forgot, but
I'm ready.
here I found a little something.
Oh, wait, what is that?
Wow, she's got a
Fragrance.
nip in it.
Yeah,
That's my father's
people here
favorite
don't say
vodka.
that word. They don't
They
use
don't say
that word.
that?
No, they don't say nip. Nip is like an East Coast thing, I think. I just know people here don't say it.
Well, it's highly inappropriate sounding, so I can't imagine why people in Boston would have adopted it.
I don't know. Why do they say packy? I don't know.
Massholes, all of them, all of us.
Oh, okay.
That is a real thing.
I'm from here. That's allowed. That's what people say here, unironically.
I have heard that before. Yeah.
Yeah, people say it unironically. They're like, "Oh yeah, he's a masshole," right? And you're like,
You just have to look it up. But yeah,
real thing.
I thought that was soju actually, Patty. What you had there, it looked like soju actually.
Oh,
But
that would
it's
be
vodka.
cool, but it's not. It's the first thing I found.
Okay.
So I was like, I'll drink this, I guess.
"Are we
Should be
doing this?
All
Yeah.
right, we'll
Drink
do it.
together?"
All right, so
EJ, Patty, thank you again for joining me on the show. This is to you guys and what you guys are doing with the Ocean Black series. Good luck to both of you, as well as Dita, if you're listening. Good luck to you as well, with your continued success. And yeah, Kampai.
Kampai.